As we begin the new decade, businesses prepared to balance the myriad risks facing the energy industry, from geopolitical tensions to climate change adaptation and mitigation, to supply chain disruptions to cyber attacks. Then, the coronavirus pandemic created new layers of uncertainty as companies adapted their operations to keep employees and communities safe, with increasing financial pressure as the global health crisis created an economic crisis. During this session, panelists will share perspectives on risk management under uncertainty and how leaders can turn inflection points and disruptions into opportunities as we move through what is sure to be a transformational decade. This panel features Melanie Bailey of ATCO Group, Miguel Stilwell-Dandrade of EDP Group, Mark Poweska of Hydro One, and Ralph Izzo of PSEG. The session will be moderated by MIT Sloan Management Review Executive Editor Elizabeth Heischler. Without further ado, please welcome the panel to the stage for our next session, Leadership in Uncertain Times.
Hello, everyone. Glad we made it. So, no pressure. You're leaders in an industry that is playing a critical role in tackling humanity's greatest challenge. And at the same time, you have day-to-day businesses to run, an incredible amount of uncertainty to manage in an increasingly unpredictable world. So thank you all for being here and helping us to all reflect on all of those challenges and on the leadership skills, qualities, and values that are going to help us get there. The past year in particular has been enormously challenging for business leaders in every sector. But we've also seen a lot of organizations step up and accomplish extraordinary things. Reflecting on the last year, I'd love to hear thoughts from each of you and to take a little time to give us a sense of what your business looks like in this moment. Of what one thing might you have been particularly proud of in the last year that you accomplished despite the adversity? Tell us about a great internal challenge that you've had to grapple with, as well as some of the significant external challenge, just to sort of help us set up on the context. And I am going to I'll just toss it out there. Perhaps we can go in just the order that we're on the screen. Miguel, if you'd like to start off.
Sure. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks everyone. So I guess, it has been a tough year, that's for sure. But if I had to just choose one thing that I'd be particularly proud of is the fact that we were able to keep all of our people safe and healthy throughout this year. And I think that was obviously a challenge. It's certainly something that was completely unforeseen and which just was tossed at us, I think, as a global economy and as a set of companies. And so the fact that we were able to react very quickly and within the space of less than a week, have more than 70% of our people working from home and continue to run the business. And we provide energy to over 10 million customers globally. Europe and the US and in places like Brazil. And we're able, in a very short amount of time, to get everyone home. Obviously, we're keeping 30% of our field force on the ground, and we're able to also quickly ramp them up and get them sort of with the necessary safety gear and sort of get everyone working also on this new sort of paradigm. And so globally, I think that was one of the biggest challenges, and the fact we're able to do that we had the infrastructure in place, both in from IT perspective, the technology in place. I think that was something that I'm particularly proud of as an organization. And perhaps associated with that is that not only were we able to do that, but we were able to keep driving the business forward. And so actually we had a very good year as a company. We just came out with, we revised our business plan and, in the context of that year, and sort of towards the end of the year, we then came out with a business plan where we are doubling our growth in renewables globally. In the US, as you know, we're number 4 player. We committed to going all green by 2030. We committed to going coal-free by 2025. So we also came out, took the advantage of it being a tough year, but to really rethink the way that we're doing business and take it a step forward and be ambitious about the goals that we are setting ourselves as a utility. So, quite frankly, I think these two things in conjunction, I think, were clear what I would sort of highlight for the year.
Great, thanks. Mark, should we trying to think of orders? Mark, do you want to go ahead, and then maybe we'll jump down to Melanie and Ralph?
Sure, Elizabeth. So for me, it's really about how our people stepped up. I'm really proud of the organization and the people of the organization, and the pandemic presented a lot of challenges to a lot of companies, ours included, but it also gave us real opportunities to step up as a company and support the communities we operate in, to support our customers. And I was really proud of the creativity our team came up with on how we can do that. We were the first utility in Ontario to offer a pandemic relief program for our customers. We returned all the security that we had from our business customers. We gave their deposits back to them because we knew cash flow was a big issue for them. We launched a Connected for Life program, which is our promise to our customers not to disconnect them and to keep them connected and support them through the pandemic. And so, all these things were the thoughts and creativity of the team, and I'm really proud of how people adapt. Layer on top that same as Miguel, we had a large percentage of our workforce had to go home. We had to worry about keeping the rest of our workforce who was still out there safe in amongst a whole bunch of uncertainty around what what the protocols were, and that presented challenges, obviously, because at the very beginning I don't think people really kind of knew, and we were all learning along the way, and that presented some communications challenges with our employees, being spread out over hundreds of communities and having our workforce spread across. We were trying to give clarity to our people when there's a whole bunch of uncertainty surrounding us. So I think that was one of the challenges that we faced, and I think we overcame it again through the use of technology and innovation that came up through the team on how to do that best. So I'd really say it is about kind of how the overall Hydro One team stepped up for our customers, for the communities, including First Nations. We operate on the traditional territories of over 100 First Nations in Ontario, and so we reached out to the piece of those nations and asked how we could support and help them. We partnered with them on many of them. Didn't have access to some of the basic things like PPE and others, so we partnered with and supported a lot of the nations through this as well. So I would say it's from an overall global perspective, I'm really proud that we were able to adapt and keep the business running while supporting our customers and community.
Great, thanks, Mark. Melanie, how was your year?
So I might just start with kind of giving a bit of context of our business situation here. So like Mark, we're in Canada. And ATCO the ATCO group of companies is involved in many businesses, energy infrastructure, both electric and natural gas utilities, structures and logistics. And we are headquartered in Calgary here in Alberta, and we have significant business in Western Canada here. The piece that I look after, of course, is our electric utility here in Alberta and the Yukon and the Northwest Territories in Canada's north. And of course, here in Alberta, we are in the heart of Canada's oil and gas industry. And decarbonization efforts are significant in our country, like they are in many places in the world. But today, the oil and gas sector remains a significant contributor to Canada's GDP. And of course, being a utility here with our footprint in sort of northern Alberta and southeastern Alberta, a significant amount of the load on our system comes from the oil and gas sector. And so I kind of give all that context to set the stage for the challenges that we had, because of course, when the pandemic hit, we were dealing with all the same health, crisis that everyone's dealt with, that we've heard from Miguel and Mark, so I won't repeat that. But we also had, of course, a sudden change in the supply-demand mix for oil, massive oversupply of oil when, planes weren't flying and cruise ships weren't running anymore. We had negative oil prices here in Canada, and the oil and gas industry largely shut in. So we, at the same time, we were kind of experiencing these real pressures from the pandemic and all of our people going home and all of that stuff. We had our largest customer segment sort of very suddenly, almost overnight, drop off. Now it's not as doomsday as maybe I make it sound. Oil prices did recover through the summer last year, and we're in a good place now. But just that experience of what was going on created just a pretty intense amount of fear and uncertainty in the people of our organization, at the same time that we were asking them to completely turn things on their head and, go do your job in a completely different way. Either you're working from home or you're still out in the field, but here's all the new protocols you have to follow to do your work in the field. And the session's about leadership, so I won't focus on the strategies and our tactical approach to that kind of demand destruction, but more about that uncertainty that people feel, and kind of what it takes to pull them along with you and remain positive and optimistic in the face of that kind of challenge. And so we really focused on kind of being there with our employees to the greatest extent we can in a, sort of a situation just like this where we're on screen with them, that we have a plan and you're part of it, and together we can do this and we can get through this. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm most proud of, is that we did, and we kind of were able to kind of keep our employees with us. Many of them, their spouse or their friends or their families were being laid off or furloughed, who work in the oil and gas industry. So there was a lot of trepidation. But I think, just in times like that, when you have that kind of uncertainty, what we did is, it's never kind of did it seem more important than to really lean into our purpose, which is keep the power on. It kind of seemed like the one thing that we could do to help keep normalcy in people's lives when everything else was not normal. So yeah, we really just leaned into our purpose, and our leadership, I think, really just needs to always be grounded in our purpose, and living that through your values. We all work for corporations that have likely very strong values. We're not all going to have the same values, but I think leaning into that is what kind of gives, or at least for us, gave employees a sense of confidence as we went through the uncertainty.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. Ralph?
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth.
Sure.
One of the challenges with going last is the coin has two sides. You can either be viewed as horribly repetitious or more positively, wonderfully reinforcing. So let me just try and mention a couple of different things, because we all experience very similar things. First of all, I would be remiss if I didn't begin by thanking the healthcare workers and the entire community that served on the front line, that enabled us to do the things that were important to enable them to get their jobs done. What I would say is, while we have all sorts of procedures and manuals and practice sessions to handle major events, I don't think anything can prepare an organization for something that was as far-reaching in its consequences. There was not one aspect of our operations that wasn't affected, whether it's a nuclear refueling outage or getting the SEC documents out. Nor was there ever anything in our rehearsals that would have anticipated the duration of something like this. So we had tremendous breadth in terms of functions affected and time frame. And therefore, what I'm proudest of is the fact that we kept the lights on and we kept the gas flowing, with sadly, unfortunately, health impacts that mirrored the population at large. I wish we had done even better than that, but yeah, I'd leave it there.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something that had struck me in my conversations with each of you in advance, that I think obviously this you're in the critical infrastructure business, so I'm not surprised that your planning was far more comprehensive and anticipated many more scenarios than I think most business leaders who kind of put pandemic over there and unlikely enough that we're not going to think about it. And so Ralph shared some thoughts about the plan versus the reality. I'm interested in any perspectives from the rest of you on, having had to pull that plan down from the shelf. Any learnings that you can take away about how to prepare sort of business continuity going forward? Of course, plans never match up to reality. Did it help you to learn anything about fine-tuning those that aspect of leadership?
I'll start since I ended. I think what we did learn is the value of having a standing cross-functional emergency crisis management team, and having depth at every one of the positions. The depth was originally designed with the expectation that at any point in time, if the team is made up of some number of people in the low double digits, that one or two folks won't be around. And that, of course, turned out to be true. But what we didn't expect to find in terms of the value of having depth is people get tired. So if you're meeting every day for 3 hours and you're doing this for 14 months, you better have depth there, because over the course of that 14 months, you need some rotations in that. So after that, the script had to be edited and modified for circumstances.
Right. Thanks. Mark, did you?
Yeah, maybe I'll just build on that. You're right. I think all of us have emergency management structures in place, and I don't think any of us contemplated they would be in place for a year and a half, that we would have to follow them. So we absolutely had to adapt them. The other thing is you're right that this industry, because of the nature and the criticality of this industry, we do have good planning in place, and we do practice things. What I would say is that things like our pandemic relief plan or our pandemic response plan, these low probability, high consequence events like this, you write a plan, you put it in place, you kind of look at it. I don't think we ever thought we would have to pull it off the shelf, frankly. And so what you learn is it's good to have a starting point, but absolutely you have to adapt it along the way. The lesson I take away from that is we need to look at some of those other plans and also look at them from this learning experience, because we might need to pull some of those low probability, high consequence plans off the shelf, and we better get learnings from this one into it. So I think it really has challenged the normal way of thinking on emergency management structures and protocols, because most of the times they're not set up for being in place for as long as they have been. Really, really critical for us was that there was clarity in what the principles and the goals were, that we were making decisions along the way, because as everything changed very quickly and still is changing quickly, you can't bubble up all the decisions all the way up the ranks through the emergency management to the top of the house. So we set two principles. One is to protect our employees, and the second is to continue to energize our customers in Ontario, and that allowed us to really drive decision making down so that we could be more adaptable to changes along the way.
Great, thank you.
Perhaps.
Miguel?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I echo a lot of what was said. I think in our case it just shows that some of these contingency plans, as you say, sometimes they're kept in a drawer and you expect never to use them. Over the last 12 months, we had not just COVID, but we actually had a cyber attack, fortunately without any serious consequences. And we also have over 1,000 megawatts of wind power down in Texas. So we're also got the polar vortex of it. So in the same 12 months, we sort of had all of these extreme events, which you don't really expect to have. I mean, the polar vortex in itself was an extreme event. Cyber attack, I mean, obviously it's not an extreme event, but it when you actually get hit by one, you're obviously not always 100% prepared, or you hope you're prepared, but not always sure how things are going to react. And I think it just shows that sort of really having resilience built into the system and having sort of a prudent risk management, whether it's a business model or sort of just some redundancies built in. And I mean, I think that's really important, particularly for something, for critical infrastructure, for companies that are managing such an important part of the sort of basic infrastructure of the economy. If you don't have that resilience, if you don't have that sort of prudent risk management, you get hit by what seems to be a once in 100-year type event, but they do happen, and so it really shows that it pays to prepare. And in that sense, I think, fortunately it's gone well so far. But as I say, just also in terms of the scale of the depth and the breadth of the events, I think it really sort of highlights that business model aspect, which I think is critical about the utilities.
Right. Got it. There's another question I want to get to here is that certainly something that I think, I've seen from my perspective in the business world at large, and we write a lot about digital transformation at MIT SMR, and there's generally been observation that companies made pretty big leaps because they kind of had to, because nothing, as the saying goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so these can be opportunities for pushing change along faster. So I'd like to ask you all whether this recent period of disruption has enabled you to do something or do something faster that had been difficult to accomplish, when things were normal, or potentially have you reorder your leadership priorities in light of it. Ralph, maybe we'll give you the first bite of this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's a whole raft of things that will happen differently. I can't believe how much more effective I am in terms of my travel, quite bluntly. While the face-to-face and personal interactions are important, we will often do non-deal roadshows with investors, and I go to Europe 1 week a year, and I manage to do 10, 12 meetings, and I'm physically exhausted over the 5 days of doing that. Well, I can do that in a day and cover Australia and the Far East as well. You wouldn't want to make a habit of that. At the other end of the spectrum, whenever a customer calls and tells us they have an appliance that's not working, we would roll a truck. And now we don't roll a truck. We first have a technician talk to that customer and see if we can't walk them through some corrections and fixes. And I'm sure others have as a whole litany of things. And then, of course, the single biggest adjustment that will come out of this crisis that we will not let go to waste is a recognition that we have a lot more flexibility in terms of granting employees the ability to work remotely. And that wasn't something we fully embraced or realized in the past.
Yeah. Had that been, I'm just curious, as a follow-up, had that been something that was sort of a little bit kind of a cultural resistance to, in terms of managers liking to see people on site and some learning there? Or
I do. Yeah, perhaps my colleagues from other nations have a different culture, but it certainly is the case at our company and in the U.S., right? Our heroes are the ones who respond to storms. And so you're on the site, you're ready to do the work when everybody else is sitting by the fireplace nice and cozy. You're out there battling the elements. So if you're an accountant or an IT professional, you want to be at the site, because even if you're not at the customer site, you're at the corporate site. And as a result, the culture definitely was one of not wind nor sleet nor snow would stop you from getting to the office.
Yeah, got it. How about for the rest of you? Anybody want to jump in? Yeah, Melanie.
I think the one thing, there's a lot of things, but one thing that we've definitely proven is that we can adopt technology a lot faster than maybe we thought we could. When there's kind of a fire under you, to get everybody working from home in the next week. And we're handing out laptops like candy at the door, and off you go, and getting everybody set up. It's amazing how quickly we did it, and how quickly the whole change management was like overnight. People just did it.
Yeah.
And so I think our kind of fear of rapid adoption of technology is not really there to the same degree it was. Mm-hmm. And it also, showed that we can do that. We can kind of be really agile and pivot and do all these things with technology. We can do it without the customer even noticing. I think that's the sign of success as a utility, when your service is so good that people take it for granted, that they don't even know that you've had this big challenge behind the scenes in getting working from home. So, and it also just showed us that some of the other stuff we're doing, with decarbonization is a really big deal. Of course, that's where we are with the oil and gas industry. And it's given us kind of a real life window into what that's going to look like as that industry changes, and how important it is for us to modernize our grid a lot faster than we were planning on doing before.
Right.
And so we're, full steam ahead on that. And I'm not sure we in the past, maybe we would have taken that a little more cautiously than we are now.
Yeah, cool. Miguel or Mark, either of you want to jump in on this one? Go ahead, Mark.
Sure. Maybe I'll jump in and build on it. I think we in the past had put up all kinds of reasons why we couldn't kind of move to working from home and that, and cybersecurity reasons and all kinds of excuses. And within days, we were all doing it successfully and weren't exposing our companies to a bunch of risk. What I'm seeing now is, as we've done it for a long time, I think the work of the future will be some sort of hybrid model. I think the employers of choice will be the ones who offer some flexibility for their employees and some hybrid. We are seeing, as we're in this longer and using technology to connect, that mental health issues are increasing. As humans, we are designed to be community type creatures, and we do crave human contact, and we are seeing that as it's gone longer, that it is having an impact on people's mental health. And so I think that the workforce of the future will be some sort of hybrid model and a combination. I also believe that the companies that just go back to the way it was, they will be left behind, and they won't be an employer of choice, and they won't get to attract the top talent. And really, it is a competition for good talent, and so we're really looking at what does that look like in the future. I think one of the other things that the opportunity that the pandemic's kind of triggered is, as we come out of this and countries try to rebuild their economies, and you combine that with the climate and the decarbonization, and electricity is fundamental to achieving long-term climate goals for wherever you are in the world. It really does put a lot of onus on utilities and the electric business to step up and meet those needs in an affordable way for customers. So that requires a lot of cooperation amongst the players, as well as acceptance to adapting to multiple technologies to meet the needs of the future.
Right, got it. And Miguel, there's an audience question for you, Miguel, that's a little off this topic, which we can jump to in a moment. But you had earlier, in the introduction, mentioned that despite it being a difficult year, it was actually a pretty great year for you, and you accomplished a lot. Do you think any of those went a little bit more smoothly or more rapidly because of the unusual circumstances? Did that kind of remove any log jams and processes or decision making?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, looking back very positively, I'm not going to say surprised, but with the level of productivity. And I certainly I think the comment that Ralph made about how much more effective you can become when you're dealing with investors, or just generally, the amount of downtime that you would typically spend in hotels and traveling, etc., that you can use much more efficiently. So, and that in general is something which I think was felt throughout the organization. In fact, I think we almost go to the other extreme, which is it is so efficient. One of the things that it is important is to try and put in place some rules so that people don't burn out, because we were getting a lot of complaints that there is no separation between work and home, and you just blend into a continuous sort of wake up in the morning, work through lunch, and then up late at night, because people don't put into place sort of certain boundaries, and so I think that is a concern, obviously, because it does eat into the mental health of the people, and particularly in people who are working with perhaps not very good conditions, or they have a lot of kids at home, they have stressful situations, or perhaps the opposite, they're completely isolated for weeks or months on end. So I think that does go to the mental health of the people, and as I say, so that is something that we also spent some time working on and communicating throughout the organization. Take care of yourself, not just physically but mentally as well, and because that is something which does concern us and has concerned us. I certainly also resonates quite a lot the idea that we won't go back to normal. We won't go back to the typical 5-day week. I think there will be certainly a lot more flexibility, but on the other hand, I personally believe it is still very important to have people back in the office, at least for some part of the time. I mean, I'm sure all of you have the same experience. People who are coming into the company, and young people just stepping in, and their work experiences. They get up on a Monday morning and they have their laptop. They open their laptop, and that's it. That's their first day at work. There's no onboarding, or, not sort of that physical thing. I have just a small anecdote, but my nephew started working after 6 months. His boss asked him, "How tall are you?" He's a rugby player, so he's a big guy. And he got up, and that was the first time his boss had actually seen him sort of standing up, and because the rest of the time you just sort of see the waist up. Yeah. So it does change the way that people interact, and the way that younger people are coming into the workforce. If you don't have the opportunity to really also incorporate that culture and that sort of workspace, I think it does make a difference. And in the medium term, you will lose out that cultural aspect of people sort of wearing the company shirt and sort of going out there, and it becomes a little bit more transactional, I think, that relationship. So it is something that personally I also think we need to spend some time on. I don't know if you want to answer your question about the cyber, or later on.
Well, we might as well just jump on it, because you had mentioned a cyber attack, and someone in the audience was interested to learn a little bit more, and if any lessons learned for the industry.
Well, I'd say the following. So it turned out well, and it was, there's a clear separation between IT and OT, and so it wasn't any critical infrastructure, but and we were well prepared, and I think we were able to turn it around. There was a ransomware attack, which I think has proliferated over the last year, and clearly comes down to, so the question was lessons learned for the industry. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a lesson, but it's something we all know. But it's what happens. It's typically human error. It's not. You can have all the technology in place. You can have all the sort of the infrastructure set up, but at the end of the day, it's typically someone who, or either service provider or someone who shared their password they shouldn't have shared, and that's always, and obviously as a result of that, also got much more into the issue. And we have invested a lot in cybersecurity over the years, but it is, typically a human error, and that's something people need to be aware of. Having said that, people will be spending more time remote and much more technology driven. It also opens up much more to, being exposed to these types of situations. So it's certainly something that we were aware of before, but it's, we were confronted with a real life situation. We had to react, and and so I think it's just means that we had to just step up even more, just to put in place mechanisms going forward.
Right. Yeah, and sort of on that subject of technology, which a few of you had also mentioned when we started off about feeling good about the level of technology that you had in place already, which positioned you fairly well. How does all this, well, I think sort of two related questions. One is, given the great deal of uncertainty that we're facing, how does that change your planning for technology investments? But maybe an alternate perspective on it is sort of come to me is, are there technologies that you now recognize might be more interesting, or more that you might be more inclined to pursue sooner, whether that's with decision support, getting into other more advanced analytics, AI. Curious what your plans are, and I'm not going to pick on anybody. I'll just let, if that sounds appealing to anybody, I'll let you.
We are, I think, lagging. Our company is lagging the industry on advanced metering infrastructure, and we recognize the importance of it. And so we finally have received permission to completely automate that function, and we're aggressively pursuing it. I do think it's a critical component of avoiding having to send people into somebody's basement to read a meter, which is often the case in some of our older housing. But to your point, Elizabeth, what I'm most excited about in that regard is coupling granular information about customer usage with better planning of how we can help the customer and use demand response and overall energy efficiency, not just reducing demand, but reducing consumption. I separate demand from energy. I think of demand as power, and I think of energy as power integrated over time. So this is all leading up to a recognition that I believe many people will continue working from home in the future. I don't know how many, but more than we had in the past. So power loss at the home used to be an inconvenience. Power loss at the home in the future might mean I can't work, I can't communicate, and I can't get in my car to go someplace where I can do those things. And we frequently get awards for outstanding reliability. But I won't kid you, the reliability we deliver to our commercial centers is very different than the reliability we built into the system for the homeowner. Mm-hmm. So that last mile has to be rethought in the context of how lifestyles are going to change going forward. And it'll be everything from AMI to different construction standards to different circuit designs, so that the small business owner, i.e. the residential customer, is not marooned when the thunderstorm rolls through.
Right. Good. Yeah, Melanie?
I just wanted to say how glad I am to hear, Ralph, that we're not the only ones just starting on our advanced metering infrastructure journey. That someone else is kind of in the same as we are. I think to your point about reliability and the importance of it, and how it's only going to become more important. And as the grid becomes more and more complex, it's going to be harder and harder to even maintain today's level of reliability once we have a significant amount of rooftop solar and energy storage in people's homes and everybody's got an EV. We're certainly not in high penetration rates of those things here in Alberta yet, but we do know that the amount of time it takes to modernize our grid, put advanced metering infrastructure everywhere, have distribution automation and control, distribution SCADA, to be able to manage these things like demand response, which you talked about, Ralph. We don't have time to wait to do those things, I don't think. I think we need to do them right now because of the amount of time it takes to do it. And we can't be kind of left with our customers without the reliability that they need if we aren't kind of fast acting on implementing those technologies so that we can keep up. And along with that, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, is that we're all very heavily regulated, price regulated utilities, and we need to, continue to make sure that policymakers and regulators can keep up with the pace of change as well, because we sometimes find ourselves with our hands a bit tied.
Right. And Melanie knows that that my power was out briefly yesterday when we talked, because I had an electrician. Well, it was on purpose, because I had an electrician here installing a 240 volt plug in my driveway for my new plug-in vehicle. So I'm an example of
planned outage.
I am the consumer who's putting pressure on you.
And if I could add one more thing, there's also a really strong safety case for all of this as well.
Yeah.
We roll trucks to remote locations to flip a switch, and there's a real safety case for not having as many truck rolls, not having as many of our employees visit customers' homes and going into their homes and into their yards. We recently we're starting our AMI deployment, and late last year had an employee attacked by a dog while she was changing out the meter to an AMI meter, which is just a horrible thing to happen. So I think not only from a reliability perspective and meeting customers' needs, but the safety of our employees as well.
Right. Great. Miguel, looked like you had something.
Yeah, no, I mean, perhaps in addition to the client side, which clearly, there's a lot of information and a lot of data coming out of that, which is obviously very interesting. Also on the generation side, I mean, we're in 20 different countries. We've got thousands of turbines worldwide, and each turbine produces, millions of data points, sort of almost on a daily basis. So, the amount of information, the amount of data that is available in the energy sector or in the power sector, whether it's from the client side, whether it's on the generation side, on the distribution side, is just brutal. And having the analytics to manage that, so that you are able to provide a resilient system, also on the generation side, particularly when you start having a lot more renewables and a lot more intermittency. I think that's critical. Also, I mean, also in terms of efficiency, I mean, in productivity, being able to fine tune, the wind panels or the wind turbines or the solar panels, that translates into more productivity coming out of the generation side. And that's obviously incredibly important to ensure the resilience of the grid. We have around 6,000 megawatts in the US, but we have around 20 gigawatts globally, just in between renewable sources. And one of the key concerns we have is ensuring that we can manage that intermittency as much as possible. And so in terms of the IT infrastructure to support that, it's a huge amount of investment as well. So I think you have that complexity coming in on the client side with the EVs, with the demand side management, with the AMI, but also on the generation side, you're also having a lot more complexity, a lot more granularity to have to manage.
Great. And Mark, did you want to add anything? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're on round 2 of AMI. We've had them for over 15 years, and it doesn't get any easier the second time, just to let my colleagues know here. But instead of talking about that side of it, I will maybe I'll talk about how COVID is made us rethink our technology on how we get work done and what we do, and obviously with the inability or the lack of it, we didn't want people gathering in the mornings to go out on the jobs for the day like we normally would, and dispatching people from home. And the way we do our work changed quite a bit through COVID for the better, for the company, more efficient, and for employees being they're not wasting a lot of time in between. And so we deployed a lot of technology in the hands of people. Every one of our frontline employees will have a smartphone with apps on it to access safety information and report things, their work orders, those kinds of things. And we were marching down that path, and we had technology in the trucks, but this is to complement that. But COVID absolutely accelerated that. We needed to, and we had the ability to do it, and it cut through a lot of the process we otherwise would have gone through. One of those things being we're a heavily unionized company. 91% of our company is unionized, and so it also gave us the opportunity to sit down with our unions and say, we have this imperative. We got to work through it together on how we're going to get work done and keep people safe. And I think some of the fears that both the unions and the employees had around some of the things we're doing now were preventing us from doing it. Now that we've been able to experience and live it, I think some of the fears we had around different start times and deploying technology and people being deployed from home, our employees are actually liking it. And so some of those fears have gone away. So it really opened up the conversation with our unions on what's possible and what employees actually are looking for and want.
Great. Yeah, one of the things that's come through from a number of you has been genuine concern for your employees. And I think we've seen a lot more leaders being much more, I think, upfront about sort of leaning into a more empathetic leadership style. And I think the times have demanded it. I'm wondering how that has manifested for you, like what you've you may have had that culture already. It may be something that has grown during the time of COVID. But what were some of the ways that you, as a leader, sort of modeled that kind of concern and putting priority of your employee health and you said mental health, physical health, and well-being, so that it kind of ripples through the company and is operationalized. Anybody have any stories about? Miguel?
I mean, well, we also had a management change last year, and so I mean, I stepped in the middle of the COVID crisis, which is, I think, also I can tell you a little bit about that as well. But I think one thing that definitely, that we're talking about everyone being remote, in a way, the fact that we're having to communicate by call, but we're all at the same level, in the sense that when I was addressing sort of, let's say, the organization, since it wasn't physical, whether the person was sitting in Houston, in Sao Paulo, or Madrid, or Lisbon, at the end of the day, there's a much bigger closeness. And I think that, at least culturally for us, was a little bit of a change, because I think before people used video calls, and but not everyone was necessarily at the same level, because there was always the people who were still, let's say, in the headquarters, they were close to the center, and then the rest was sort of the periphery. And this ended up almost making it much more democratic, in the sense of making everyone almost equally close. And so, in terms of the interaction that we had with the employees, so obviously we did a lot more regular communication, so just keeping in touch. I think there was we did feel the need to interact more often, as in sort of fireside chats with the people, and I think that was appreciated. And the amount of Q&A we would get was much higher than we'd ever got in the past. So actually, we had the best internal satisfaction, let's say, performance last year in our history, which is surprising in such a difficult year.
Yeah.
But the sort of internal climate and the internal employee satisfaction was at a record high. And I mean, I can't explain it exactly, but I think it was sort of a number of things, people feeling that they were in an important sector, things were going relatively well, but also that there was this, you work closer in a way to people, even though it was remote and virtual. In some sense, there was also much bigger closeness. But anyway, at least that was our experience.
Yeah. How about at the rest of your companies? Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, I think Miguel touched on a lot of the salient points. Obviously, communication is always an important attribute that a leader has to demonstrate. And in times of crisis, the frequency of the communication always has to be increased. I think what was unique about this is something that several of us have touched upon. Miguel said it quite explicitly. The fact that home and work became one.
Yeah.
So suddenly the empathy that you always feel, but take for granted that people recognize, you needed to be explicit about. And I found myself many times, instead of talking about safety statistics or customer outage numbers, making sure that I would tell employees, look, if you have a young family, your child does not understand that you're working, and give them what they need. It's really hard to be a good parent. It's hard to be a good employee. It's hard to be a good spouse. It is impossible to do all three of those at the same time. And don't expect yourself to do it. So I remember saying things like that, and I literally got an email from one employee, and she said, I started crying after you said that, because I thought it was just me. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, how? And I don't mean to be sexist, but unfortunately, many times the family burden falls upon the woman, right? So, so I think the issues and the nature of the communication had to change, and we had to recognize this clash of two worlds. And I would, what I tried to do in my various employee meetings, which we continued, was just open up about the struggles I was having. Clearly, each one of us on this has a 24/7 job, but I never fully appreciated that even though my job is 24/7, I had some separation when I left the office or when I wasn't in a hotel, and now that was gone. So I had to start doing things differently. So I do think that while communication frequency had to increase, and that would be expected, the nature of the communication and the topics discussed had to change quite a bit as well.
Great. Mark, Melanie?
it's just maybe I really like what Ralph was saying about, kind of telling personal stories in those town halls with your employees, because I think that really that kind of sort of humility and vulnerability and realness really builds trust. And it's in a time when that's just so important to have trust, when we're all kind of virtual like this, and to really just show our employees that we trust them as well, to do what they need to do. And I really almost like it when, you're in a very important meeting and someone's child, you see them walk in the room behind them and makes a big disruption, because it gives me an excuse to just reinforce that that's okay, and that's the way it is now, and we just have to deal with that, and it's not a sign, a black mark against the employee at all. And in fact, I don't mind when my children, I'm in the office today, but normally I am at home, and I don't mind when they come in and make a show on the screen, because it just kind of humanizes us as people in the organization with the same goals as everybody else, and we're all just doing our best.
Melanie, in my 14 years as CEO, my popularity was never so high as when my cat walked across my keyboard in the middle of the meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Mark, did you want to add anything on this point about just?
No, I was just going to make the humanizing point. Absolutely, I think it made leaders vulnerable and it humanized leaders, which I think is overall a good thing. That was the only point I was going to add to it.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw just lob an additional little one in that came to mind, because earlier you were all talking about culture as well, and culture is something that really is so driven by the leader. Really sets the tone, and so this is sort of related, but obviously showing vulnerability, showing empathy, showing concern is a huge way of demonstrating your culture. Any other things that you've done to sort of shore up the culture or try to reinforce it? And I did not prepare our panelists for this question, so I'm just tossing it out there, and I might strike out, but.
Maybe I'll kick it off, then I'll take the wild ball pitch. But I think from culture perspective, you can see that leaders, whether you're a political leader or a business leader, are under the microscope for our behaviors and our actions during this time in particular. And you can see the ones that kind of did things that were against what they were asking either their voters or their employees to do. Got called on it. So I think from a culture perspective, it was really important to me that I was walking the talk even more so than ever, and demonstrating kind of my support for following the things that the public health officials were asking us to do, and the things that we were asking our employees to do. And I still haven't got the vaccine, because I'm not going to skip the line. I'm going to wait my turn. I think those types of things, people are looking. They're looking even closer at leaders during this time, and I think it's really important from a cultural perspective. That spills over into in the future when we're asking our employees to follow the rules to stay safe. If we're not doing it ourselves during a time like this, how can we ask our employees to do that all the time? Mm-hmm. So I think from a culture perspective, really important that leaders really show up well, particularly during this time.
Right. Thank you. So, we were talking a lot about the particular leadership challenges of navigating through the past year. We could kind of broaden our perspective out to certainly there's a lot else going on in our world today besides a pandemic. It's been a very interesting year. I mean, we are certainly, a much more interconnected world than we have been. We have a lot of, challenges with regard to, social upheaval and disruption, and a lot of movements for change. There's just increasing, we're all operating in an environment that's increasingly polarized politically. There are a lot of external forces that you're all dealing with, especially if you're in multiple markets or dealing with partners in other countries. So when we're thinking about leadership skills for this kind of a world, what are some of the sort of increasingly important leadership skills that you think we'll need in this much more complicated world, where if you had to put it in a nutshell, I would say you can't kind of just stick to your old school. You could sort of stick to your business, stick to your knitting. Society is asking a lot more of business leaders these days. Curious what you think.
We have certainly noticed that obviously all of us are in companies that have been around for many, many years, and we pride ourselves on our longevity. But now all of a sudden, or at least within the last 10 years, investors are very focused on sustainability in the form of ESG, environment, social, and governance. And technology has complicated the way in which we expect our employees to behave. So we take action against employees who behave in ways that we wouldn't allow on the job, even if they do it on their own time. But there's a social media link to us. We say, well, look, you've posted that you're a PSEG employee and you said this. I know you may think you did that on your own, but that's simply not allowed. Well, that's a two-way street. Now that we've said and done that to employees, our employees are expecting us, to your point, Elizabeth, to weigh in on voting access, systemic racism, LGBTQ rights. So we have found ourselves often writing on that. Sometimes I've written to the President of the United States. Other times I've just written to employees. We don't represent ourselves as experts in some of these subjects, but we do represent ourselves as having certain values and expectations on matters. So our political action committee defunded any contribution to the 149 members of the House who voted against certifying the election after the Capitol had been invaded. We lost 18 contributors to the PAC, but we thought it was the right thing to do. It also forced us to think, gee, the pandemic is a huge challenge, but it's a solvable challenge, right? I mean, whether it's messenger RNA or other techniques, yet the world did a really bad job of coordinating its actions.
Yeah.
So if I try to take some lessons from that and then think about climate change and the interrelationships involved in that, it's a little bit frightening. So we've accelerated what we believe to already have been a leadership role in climate change. So we're out of coal in 40 days from now. We'll be out of natural gas as a power supply by the end of the year. We will be 100% carbon free. We are now investing in offshore wind with Ørsted. We'll keep our nuclear plants going. Our single biggest new investment is energy efficiency. We've embraced President Biden's 80% reduction for the electric sector by 2030. So COVID showed us that multi-party complex issues, the world hasn't quite mastered that yet, and we need to get focused on this sooner rather than later. So there's been the wider context has had some profound impacts on us.
Yeah. So I think in translating that to leadership, then are there particular skills, I guess, that that leaders are maybe not necessarily prepared for? Mark?
Yeah, I attended the session earlier this week with Roma Konarczyk. Anyway, the author of the Good Ancestor, and it really kind of stuck with me. And there's a couple things in there that really stuck with me. It's really that long-termism versus short-termism of leaders thinking, and I really like the fact that investors and investment communities pushing towards that long-termism, because normally the market's quarter to quarter, and you get held on that, and the fact that investors are valuing long-termism and long-term thinking, I think is really a positive for leaders, and leaders have to grasp that. I share Ralph's concern over how can we meet climate targets when we couldn't get ourselves together to deal with this issue, which is a 1.5 to 2 year issue, never mind a 30 or 50 year issue. But I think it will be industry that has to lead that, as opposed to waiting for kind of governments and others to lead that, because they turn over every 4 years and that. So I think leaders need to have that long-termism and that long-term thinking and the cathedral thinking, which it's been trained out of us over the years with technology and things like that. And so really, our up and coming leaders, we can actually learn from them on a lot of this, and it is a trait that we have to build in, because quite frankly our investors are valuing that as well. So we don't have an excuse not to.
Yeah.
So I think just in terms of kind of the leadership attributes to do all these things, and without repeating what's already been said, I don't see us, and I'm not just talking about the electric industry, I'm talking about everywhere. I'm not sure I see us ever really being able to go back to, or wanting to go back to, some of the traditional, more hierarchical command and control styles of leadership that we saw in the past. And the reason I say that is because centralized decision making is not agile. And if there's one thing we need to be in order to navigate all of this stuff, it's agile and it's quick, and it's to be able to do things quickly and pivot. And that means kind of decentralizing decision making and putting tools in the hands of our employees that allows them to make the decision on the spot instead of having to go back to the office. And so, when we're thinking about leadership qualities, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. Leaders who have kind of a growth mindset, strong emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and understanding how words and actions impact the whole organization. And I guess that really just goes to the whole culture question that you raised earlier, and the culture of the organization to be able to move quickly in the ways that we need to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, obviously, I completely agree with everything that's been said, and particularly now that leaders are so exposed, and you were talking about having that visibility and that sort of very direct context. I mean, it's not possible anymore to be a good leader, stuck in an ivory tower or in an office, and so there is that greater level of scrutiny, and you really need to walk the talk, and you need to believe in what you're doing. You need to believe that you are investing in the future, you are taking the right actions, you are thinking about climate change, not just because the investors want you to, obviously that's also a good reason, but because it really is an existential threat, and that we need to be all moving in that direction. I also definitely resonates with me the issue around flexibility, and so the resilience, idea of resilience, and being able to adapt to these extreme events, or these sort of extreme outliers, and and that's something that, again, sort of that very, I think the command and control style is not resilient. I mean, that's not something which, it's not only not adequate to the current way of working, but it's not also effective in terms of as a business model to be able to react to these type of events, which seem to be happening much more frequently. So
yeah, absolutely. Great. And, one of the things that, Ralph, you had mentioned, just in terms of the, our current business environment, the backdrop of increased, social activism, especially around issues of, race and diversity and equality. In the US, at least, this has become a really huge issue for leadership, and there's been a real demand. I'm not sure how much over the past year this has impacted you in Canada or in Portugal, but given that a lot of organizations have made pretty big promises and commitments about diversity within their own walls, and looking at who's on their board and their executive team and all that. So, given that, as that is a higher priority, is that a higher priority in your organizations, and how are you tackling it? I don't know if anyone wants
It's absolutely a higher priority. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Melanie. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, it went from sort of just being a logical thing, right? That why would any business not want to be viewed as an attractive place to work by some slice of the world, whether that was a particular gender, the biggest slice, 50%, or some narrower slice, to then, okay, well, maybe we don't want to We don't want to not be attractive, so we'll use that as a tiebreaker when all things being equal, diversity matters. To now a recognition that no. Just like for some engineers, they've got to be good at math. For a management team to be good at multiple perspectives, we have to have diversity. So it's an attribute that we seek. It's not a tiebreaker. It's not just sort of an afterthought, something that logically comes along. I mean, for example, New Jersey, and the world is bigger than New Jersey, obviously, by 2025 is going to be plurality minority. So we just have to be an appealing place to work to a whole wide constituency of folks. And the beauty of embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion is that we've now so greatly expanded what that means. So yesterday I participated in one of our diversity council meetings, and the diverse attribute that was being discussed was disabilities. And then it got more specific than that, visible disabilities versus invisible disabilities. So the recognition that we want employees and suppliers to bring the best part and all of themselves to the conversation is what I think is going to continue to propel and accelerate our efforts in this regard, right? You really just don't want to not avail of yourself the full richness of your existing employees and your potential employees, your existing suppliers and your potential suppliers. And you might get away with it for the short run in terms of saying how much you value it when you first meet them. But if you don't walk the talk once they're inside the organization, it's just a short-term game that you'll be able to win at.
Thank you. Melanie, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, this is a big focus for us as well. I think we all know, and Ralph already said it, that having diversity in the room or a diverse team is how you overcome your blind spots and how you fill your gaps. And it's human nature to surround yourself with like-minded people, but really that's the opposite of what we want. We want people who don't think just the same as us so that we can really get to the root of an issue or a solution. And we're doing the same sorts of things that other organizations are doing with the DE&I Council, and we're tracking our performance in certain areas and reporting on them. One thing I'll maybe focus in on in Canada, we do have a large Indigenous population here, particularly in Canada's north, and ATCO does have utilities and operations in Canada's north. And we do just recognize that there were wrongdoings against Indigenous people in this country. And so that's a really big focus of us. We have a moral obligation as a business in this country to work towards reconciliation. And that means things like economic participation in projects through investment, employment, jobs, community building, all sorts of things. So that's a very big focus for us. And where we like to start with is just ensuring that the employees in our company look just like the customers and the communities that we serve. And that's sort of what we strive to be. And the same, the same can be said of other underrepresented groups like LGBTQ and people with disabilities, racialized people, and of course women as well. One area that's probably everyone struggles with is the very, very low percentage of women in the trades in the electricity industry, and line workers, electricians, techs, and so we have a lot of focus on trying to improve that. And then of course around the senior leadership table and in the boardroom, there's still lots of room to improve there at senior levels. So.
Right. Yeah, and as Ralph mentioned earlier, this has realistically been, the crisis has been pretty tough on a lot of female workers who do in fact wind up carrying a lot of the load of homeschooling and all that while trying to do a full-time job. So yeah, I think we're seeing studies showing a lot of women leaving the workforce as over the last year, which is making it even more difficult. Miguel, what's been your experience with these issues?
I mean, obviously it is key, and I definitely recognize the comments that were made, and they're very similar in Europe. We have, again, as I said, last year we also took the opportunity to reshuffle both management and the board. We're now at 40% women on the board and on the executive team, and it is something. Obviously, the utility pyramid is typically much more male dominated. The legacy technicians are much more male, and But we have a target that we will get to over a third women on the sort of throughout the organization by 2030. We're currently at around 25% or 23%. But at least at the at the board and at the executive level, we've already taken, I think, big steps in that direction, and quite frankly, very positive steps. I mean, it's sometimes it seems like it's being imposed on one side by external forces, but quite frankly, the outcome is then so positive that I think you definitely win the hearts and minds of the rest of the organization by how well things then actually work. And so the experience, I think, quite frankly, in our company has been great. But it is something that you need to spend time on. You need to spend, dedicate resources to working on it and take a conscious effort to define targets to make it happen. Because otherwise, if you just let the natural inertia, things don't necessarily happen sort of at the speed and at the scale that you would like it to. So one of the initiatives we're working on is very much around getting female engineers, just to get into the universities so that then we can hire them also. And there are certain types of jobs which at least don't seem to have a very high level of women, and so it's more difficult to then get them also onto the workforce. So you need to act all the way down also into the, let's say, universities, high schools, etc., so that you can have a good funnel.
Right, got it. Mark, do you have anything you wanted to add on this? Are you?
Sure, it's absolutely a focus of any company, and ours included, and we have a ways to go. We have started at the leadership level, and 50% of our board is gender diverse. We don't have a lot of diversity in the other sectors, and coming from, again, a utility perspective, which is predominantly trades male dominated, it's really around. I think Ralph said it is if you don't adjust and create a culture that values and accepts diversity and diverse thought, people will walk with their feet. You can hire diverse candidates, but they won't stick around unless you create the environment that is safe for people to speak up and have their language. I would say during COVID, it was really interesting as we were making decisions, and as a leadership team, you could see in the room that the people who were like-minded, looked the same, a bunch of white people like me, males, we thought one way, and the diverse candidates in the room thought a different way. And if it was just up to kind of one group, we would have come up with a much different decisions along the way and different solutions, which would have been suboptimal and actually wouldn't have worked in the long run and would have damaged the company. So there was a lot of really good examples on where that diverse thinking in the room led to much better outcomes in along the way, always, but particularly during COVID, it was stark because we were making decisions, daily along the way, particularly at the front end. And so I like the way Ralph portrayed it, which is I think historically it was one of these things that all else equal, but it wasn't something that people thought out as being a value and a differentiator as a company. And absolutely, I think all leaders and companies are seeing this as it is a differentiator. It's to bring that diversity, and you will be a better company. Right.
Exactly. Thanks. And Mark, you had mentioned a few minutes ago a speaker the author of that book, The Good Ancestor, which is a good cue for another question that I wanted to be sure to leave enough time to address, which is just the question of your legacies as leaders, especially at such a kind of really important time in the human race and the planet's history. Not to say we're all counting on you, but what as you think about yourself, in 2050, what will you have wanted your legacy as a leader to be? What kind of a leader do you want to be remembered as, and are there particular accomplishments that you hope to have made by then? Everybody's smiling. Anybody want to go first? I'll let you go first because you got the book.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the presentation as well. And so as I was going through that, I was actually thinking of that question, and it made me think of the long-termism, the cathedral thinking, and everything else. So, as a leader, if I look at my present role and our company, we're a transmission distribution company in Canada. We supply, we connect 40% of the Canadian population with electricity, and 40% of the GDP gets driven by the companies that we transmit power over and connect. And so when I think of it from that perspective, and I think kind of all the things that society's trying to do, and we're trying to do, if I was to look back after my tenure, the things I would want to say I accomplished were, two things. One is that I enabled the adoption of new technologies and created the ability for broader Canada to decarbonize and meet our climate goals. And the second one is through our investments that we're doing in our system, that I've created good partnerships with the Indigenous peoples and the First Nations of this province, the 100 that we operate in their traditional territories, and we've made meaningful change in their long-term goals and helping them achieve what they're trying to achieve, which in general is economic self-sufficiency and better lives for the members of their communities. And so if I think back, and there's a great opportunity for us to do that as we're coming out of COVID and reinvesting in the green economy. Both those things come together great. And if I when I'm done my tenure, I can look back at those two things. Those would be the legacies I'd want to leave.
Great, thanks. Miguel, can I pick on you?
Sure. I mean, I think any leader wants to have impact. And I think in this case, impact internally and externally. I mean, obviously some of these things then sound a little bit cliche, but internally you want to leave it a better place for people to work. You want to be able to have a diverse, inclusive environment, attract talent. We've just recently, as I said, that we launched a new business plan, sort of reaching out to 2025, and we talk about one of the key pillars, the 3 pillars. It's a future-proof organization, and the idea of attracting talent, retaining it, and keeping the company relevant in the long term, and making sure we are sort of progressive and actually position the company like that. And I think in that sense, so internally, that's obviously as a leader, what you want to do is attract the best people possible, people who are smarter, who are better, certainly than I am, and who can, make a difference then to the company going forward, and you feel that you're leaving something behind. And externally, I think, clearly, we believe very much in the energy transition, and we've been investing for a long time in this. We believe it is going to happen one way or the other. It needs to happen. I don't think the question is, there's a lot of, or certainly I'm getting a lot of questions from investors. Are there too many companies coming into the space? Too much competition? Are the returns going to go down? I don't think that's the question. The question is, are we doing enough? Mm-hmm. It's there's just so much that needs to be done in this space. It's just such an exciting time to be in this space. We have an incredible decade or decades, multiple decades ahead of us in terms of the electrification of the economy, the decarbonization of the economy, and the utilities are going to be at the center of that. And so the question is, are we going to be able to really invest enough to, innovate enough, make a change that is sufficiently fast to fight climate change? And obviously we want to be part of that. And as a leader of EDP, certainly, I want to make sure that we are a relevant part of that change, and we are able to keep the company relevant going forward. And so, certainly, I go back to the beginning. Obviously, any leader, I think, what they want to do is have impact, and right. that's certainly, I think, right. The legacy you want to have.
Right, Melanie, how do you hope to be remembered as a leader?
I think for me, it's kind of all around how well we were able to modernize ourselves as a company. And by that, I mean, our physical grid and what we invest in. Yes, that's changing. But that might be the easy part. We're very good at investing in utility assets, so that might be the easier part. The harder part, I think, is how we can navigate the changes in our business model as decarbonization and the energy transition occurs. It almost feels like COVID has accelerated the energy transition. At least in Canada, that's how it feels. And maybe it would have been at this pace regardless. But of course, the pace of change just keeps increasing. And for me, I think the way that we successfully navigate that is making sure that all of our people are kind of behind us in what we need to do, and that our culture is an agile one and supportive of change instead of fearing change. And we talked a bit earlier about culture, and that just comes down to leadership. And so for me, it's I would feel like I've done what I was set out to do. If I was able to kind of shift the culture in the way it needs to in order to come out the other side in 20 or 30 years and be the company, whatever that looks like. We've been price regulated monopoly utilities for centuries. And there wasn't a lot of change for like a century. And we don't know exactly how it's going to go, but I'm fairly certain that a century from now, utilities will not be what they are today. We will be very, very different companies, and we will be offering very different services to customers. And like any industry that's been disrupted, there's a chance that some of us aren't going to make it through that. So yeah, that's what I hope my legacy will be
Great.
to kind of navigate that change.
Okay. And Ralph, what are your thoughts on your leadership legacy?
It's a version of what Melanie said. I think the abbreviated version would be to be known as a leader who did a good job of aligning the interests of shareholders with the needs of society. I mean, at our core, we're a regulated utility. We provide universal access to something, right? People may think of that as electrons and BTUs, but I think of it more broadly than that. And so in fulfilling that legacy and in aligning the interests of shareholders to the needs of society, it takes on many different components. It's having greatly increased the number of employee business resource groups we have so that we can embrace diversity more fully. It's saving our nuclear plants, which provide 90% of the carbon-free electricity of New Jersey. It's expanding the definition of rate base so that a light bulb now financially is no different to our investors than a transformer. And a whole host of other things that move us towards a carbon-free future that is oftentimes underpinned by a very different demographic than we've ever seen before, and a set of technologies that are much more bits-oriented than they are atoms-oriented.
Right. Got it. And Melanie made an interesting comment in this context of the industry is going to be a very different industry and probably offering very different services. How are you preparing and this question is for all of you, how are you preparing that next generation of leaders within your organizations and maybe just reflecting on the industry itself? Do you feel like overall as an industry, what are you doing to sort of bring up that next generation?
I think
leadership development is. I'm sorry, Melanie, go ahead.
I was just going to say the one thing I think I would look for in future leaders is a growth mindset and kind of the belief that we can continuously learn, we can continuously improve, continuously get better. Those things aren't fixed in a person. And if you have that mindset, then sky's the limit. Right. As to what we can do, and I think that's what we need in order to navigate the change.
Great, thanks. And Ralph, you were about to talk about some leadership development.
No, I was going to say leadership development is more of a marathon than a sprint.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are multiple dimensions to it now that maybe were not as prominent in the past. In the past, it was make sure they've had a stint in every part of the organization so that they have a full grasp of all of our functions. But now the broader social context, understanding where policy is going, Wayne Gretzky was a great hockey player because he skated to where the puck was headed, not to where it was. It's a cliche at this point. But I do think it's multiple dimensions and not just giving them a broad set of rotational experiences in the company, and it is done over many, many years.
Right. Mark, have you?
Yeah, I guess I agree with a lot of what's said. The one thing I would add is I think part of the we can learn a lot from the future leaders ourselves as existing leaders, and reverse mentorship to me is a really important thing. And we talk about climate, we talk about diversity in that. If I look at the youth and I look at kind of what's going around in the world today, and I look at the rallies and I look at who's driving these things and who's promoting these, it is the future leaders and it is the upcoming people. So I think that we as existing leaders can learn a lot from the incoming leaders as well through things like reverse mentoring programs and that. And I agree with everything that Melanie and Ralph said. That's what I would add.
Great. And we have, I think, 2 minutes left. So Miguel, any thoughts on the future of leaders at EDP and the industry?
No, I mean, I do think you need to expose them to, future leaders to different types of situation, not necessarily to get that technical know-how or insights, but to get them to deal with, different real life situations and, expose them to, to the broader society and some of these issues which aren't necessarily technical. And so, obviously we assume that on the technical side, everyone will be able to get up to speed quite easily. And so that's not the real challenge for the leader. The real challenge is how to deal with all of these much broader societal issues which are impacting the companies as well, and and how to manage that complexity. And that's something that needs to be done. I believe very much also in coaching and mentoring. And just making sure that people have the time sort of to reflect on all of these different issues.
Right. Great. Thank you. Well, I think they're going to pull the curtain on us in a minute or so. So well, thank you all so much for being here and spending the time and sharing your hard-won experience with the rest of us.
A pleasure.
It's been great.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks.
And take care. Stay safe.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you again to all of our panelists for sharing lessons learned from your own experiences and reflecting on what the leaders of the future will need to be successful as the industry continues to evolve in the coming decades. As this year's GEF comes to a close, we'd like to invite EEI President Tom Kuhn and EEI Vice President for International Programs, Dr. Lawrence Jones, to the stage for some closing remarks.
Oh, we are live. Okay.
Live. Right.
I didn't know we were live. Well, I guess so. We
Okay.
are. I guess. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we're coming to the end of this, so we've lost our composure of when we're live, and now we're not live. So this is like a joke on me. All right. All right. Thank you, team, for pulling the fast one on me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to turn it over to Tom Kuhn, EEI President, to give some closing remarks. Tom, over to you.
Well, again, everyone, we've come to the end of EEI's 5th Annual Global Electrification Forum. We've had 2 really jam-packed and exciting weeks of a very informative program with panel sessions, keynotes, executive roundtables, an innovation showcase, fireside chats. We've heard from a truly impressive group of CEOs from some of the world's leading electric companies, as well as leaders from finance, government, and philanthropy. As I said at the start of this event, I am very proud that EEI's member companies here in the United States, as well as our international member companies around the world, are leading a profound energy transformation for our customers. Throughout these 2 weeks, we've explored the various pathways, inflections, and crossroads, and we have considered the convergence of transformations in the industry as we look toward Destination 2050. We have covered an impressive array of subjects that are top of mind for everyone. Serving our post-pandemic world, the electrification of economies, the clean energy future, digitalization, customer expectations, business and regulatory models, resilience, financing net zero, and as you heard at the recent panel, leadership. I want to extend my special thanks to the more than 650 registrants, as well as to more than 50 speakers representing 34 countries at this year's GEF. I am proud that EEI has helped to build deep and strong relationships with so many global energy partners. I also want to extend a huge thanks to all of our terrific and distinguished speakers, especially His Royal Highness Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, Lord Mervyn King, former Governor of the Bank of England, Romana Krzyzarnik, public philosopher and author of The Good Ancestor, Malcolm Turnbull, the 29th Prime Minister of Australia, Rod Carr, Chair of New Zealand's Climate Change Commission, Thomas Anker Christensen, Climate Ambassador from Denmark, Hamadoun Touré, the Malian Minister of Communication and Digital Economy. It's not too many conferences that get that kind of a broad array of speakers. Thanks also to the many U.S. and international member company executives, as well as leaders from the financial, transportation, and other sectors who took part in panels and fireside chats across these 2 weeks. We successfully hosted the Transatlantic and Asia Pacific regional dialogues on harmonizing efforts on net zero, with great exchanges of ideas with CEOs and policymakers from those regions. Yesterday, we recognized the importance of Earth Day in a conversation with Alan Schwartz, Executive Chairman of Guggenheim Partners, and greatly appreciated the remarks from Prince Charles. This was followed by the session, Realizing Net Zero Ambitions, covering policy and finance, with keen insights from the former president of Iceland, Olafur Grimsson, Dr. Andrew Steer, President CEO of Bezos Earth Fund, Pat Vincent-Collawn, Chairman, President, CEO of P&M Resources, and other global leaders. The GEF ended today with a session on leadership as we head toward 2050. This period will be filled with radical uncertainty, as was so well described by Lord Mervyn King in his keynote conversation with Lawrence 2 weeks ago. A final thank you to the GEF sponsors, Guidehouse, Black & Veatch, ICF, and Amply Power, and our media partners, Electric Perspectives, Public Utilities Fortnightly, the Energy Industry Times, and other partners, Volans and the American Council on Capital Formation. Please join me in extending a virtual congratulations to Lawrence and the International Programs team and the other EEI staff who were involved in making this a successful forum. At the end of every GEF, I ask Lawrence how he is going to make the next year more exciting and content-rich. As the past 2 weeks have shown, he and his teams have always delivered. I am confident that we will be back next year for the 6th annual forum. In fact, I would not be surprised if they are not already brainstorming ideas for next year. Through the rest of 2021, EEI International Programs will continue to host various webinars and regional dialogues, and we will launch new strategic engagement. The Global Conversation Series already has an impressive lineup of authors and thought leaders. But most importantly, I want to thank you for your continued engagement until we meet again next year, and we look forward to continuing to work with you throughout the remainder of this year on the many challenges and exciting opportunities that face our industry. Once again, thank you to everyone, and Lawrence, back to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. As you said, we are a few minutes from ending this year's Global Electrification Forum, and I would be remiss if I didn't just say a huge thank you to you, Tom, and to Brian and to Phil, Brian Wolf and Phil Muller, for giving the international program the flexibility to go ahead and experiment with new ideas and to take risk when it comes to setting up such an event. And it was indeed a risky proposition. But I'm also very, very pleased that we're able to get the strong support of West Peak Productions, the production company we work with, who has made our lives sometimes a little nervous, but for the most part, they've made our lives very, very easy. I also want to thank the 700 registered participants, like Tom said, almost, but those who attended 500 plus during the entire 2-week period. And now let me finally thank the 3 individuals who really, really made the GEF work. First, I want to thank Kimberly Mitchell on our team for exciting work and all the things she did behind the scenes. I want to thank Alikia Malavarapu, who really kept me on track and made sure I didn't run out of time. And then I want to also ask you all to really thank our Master of Ceremony, who did a spectacular job, Vanessa Ferrero. So please join me now in giving a round word of applause to these three individuals for all the work to do, or for all the work to do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vanessa and Kim and Alikia. And there you had your standing ovation, virtual as it may be. We look forward to seeing you at the next Global Electrification Forum in 2022. Whether it's virtual or whether it's digital, time will tell, but I can rest assured we will be meeting again. So once again, thank you so much for being part of this forum. And again, thank you so much, Tom, for all your support. And thank to all the EEI staff and everyone else. Goodbye and have a nice weekend.
As Lawrence said, thank you all again for joining us throughout these 2 weeks. To stay in touch with EEI International Programs, please follow us on Twitter at EEI_INTL. We also invite you to listen to our new podcast, The Electric Perspectives Global Circuit, where we will continue these conversations about our electric future. You can find the episodes wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Electric Perspectives. I have also put a link in the chat for our second episode, which focuses on thriving under crisis with regenerative leadership. I think this episode builds nicely on today's sessions. We hope to see you again at next year's GEF, and until then, we hope you will join us for other EEI International Programs events throughout the year. Thank you for attending EEI's 5th Annual Global Electrification Forum.